Okay, before we get started with this exercise, you're going to need the following. Some kind of smooth surface to draw on. I recommend a drawing board like this, and obviously a black piece of paper, which is what we're going to be using. I like to tape mine down in the four corners. That way, if this slips off the table, I don't lean on it and get a big crinkle in the paper. It keeps it nice and stable. So I always tape it down just a little bit in the corners. And then you're going to need a white colored pencil that is sharpened. Um, so just make sure it's sharpened before you get started. All right, let's get going. Now the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and I think I'll just keep this horizontal. It doesn't really matter, but I'm going to make, just for practice, two very thin at the top bars. I'm not using a ruler. It's not that important. And then the first one, I'm going to make a gradient, and I'm going to use smooth shading, so I'm going to make it as light as I possibly can, going to dark. And in the second one, I'm going to make a value scale. So I'm going to just go ahead and set this up ahead of time and make 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 compartments is fine. So go ahead and get working on that. Okay, so I'm almost done with my my gradient and my value scale. The gradient was pretty easy to do. The value scale I'm finding to be a little bit more of a challenge because as I get over here, the idea is that each of these squares should be a considerably different value, with this one being the lightest, obviously, and then this one being the darkest. So this one I can either leave blank or I'll show you a little trick here. I'm going to leave this very light, and then the last one, and I just realized this pencil is not sharp. I use a black colored pencil, and I notice, and I don't know how well you can see that in the video, but I noticed that when I use black colored pencil on black paper, the black colored pencil is actually considerably darker than the paper. I don't like to use black colored pencil until the very end of my drawings because with colored pencil you can't erase, but the idea behind this is that you can always make something a little bit lighter, a little bit darker, but once you add this value in, you can't go back and change it. So I can't really see a distinct difference between these, so that's what I'm talking about. That you need to go back and just kind of fix these and make sure that you can see that change in value between each of these squares. And if you can't see it, then go back and make it work for you. And it doesn't have to be, you know, immaculate or anything. I just want you to just get to the point where you feel like you have a control of the value. And of course, by the time you get here, this one you can practically leave just blank paper, and then this is just a black colored pencil. Okay, for the next part of this, I'm going to make a cup, and the cup is going to be, I'm modeling it after a white styrofoam cup, and I'll be honest, I don't have a white styrofoam cup in front of me. I probably should be drawing this with a white styrofoam cup in front of me, but I've drawn them enough that I think I can just go from memory. So I made that basic, you can see I'm just drawing as lightly as possible. I don't even know how well you can even see that in the camera. So I'm just going to quickly just plot this out. And hopefully if you can't see it, that means I'm doing something right in the sense that it's supposed to be super light. Alright, so there it is. I need to decide a light source. I'm just going to go ahead and arbitrarily decide that the light is coming from this direction. So I'm going to add in a shadow over here on the table. And so there's my cup, and of course it's going to come up and do something like that around there. So the idea behind this, again, is if the light's coming from this direction, what's interesting is that normally, if this was a basic cylinder, this would all be way up here. But because the light is shining in from the top, this actually is going to be kind of dark. And so what happens is that this part right here gets kind of light right there. And of course here, this is where my highlight is going to be on the cup. So this is the lightest part of the cup right here, just like I would have a cylinder. So I'm going to add that right there just to show you. And I'm going to make that, of course, the lightest possible area. But I'm not making, of course, a gradient, not a gradient, a value scale. I want this to be smooth in transition. So as this moves over this way, this is going to become a little bit lighter. And I'm going to transition over here as well and do the same thing. So the lightest part is actually in the cup a little bit, bizarrely enough. And then as I move over this way, eventually I'm going to come over to my shadow gradient. And if you're thinking in like silver, what are you talking about? I'm talking about this, okay? You have your reflected light, and then you have your shadow core, your shadow gradient, all that good stuff. So hopefully you've already done that exercise. That'll really help you. Okay, so I'm going to keep moving over this way. This is going to get darker and darker. And bizarrely enough, because it's reverse value, as you go, what's bizarre about it is that you actually use less and less of your colored pencil and let the paper do the work for you. So obviously the darker you go means the less you're actually drawing in that area. It takes a little bit of a kind of a switch of the mind. So I'm going to add this in over here and then lighten this up really quickly over here. That's where my shadow gradient, or no, I'm sorry, my shadow core, I misspoke, which is not completely black, so I'm going to add a little bit of that in there. All right, now here's the weird thing. Up here at the top, light's coming in, so up here, this is actually, it's not going to be totally dark, but it's not going to be as light as this part of the cup. Then what's interesting is as the light comes over here, it actually gets lighter, bizarrely enough, on this side. So this is actually another highlight on the inside. Maybe not as light as this is, but the interior portion of the cup on this side actually lightens up. It's like a flip-flop. This is light on this side, this is light on this side. And then you go back. Like that. You know, there's a rim on the cup, I just realized at the top, so I am going to kind of show that that part is going to be light up here, all the way around. You can kind of see that that would be the top surface of the cup. Hopefully this is sort of coming into a life for you. Bizarrely enough, because this is shadowy here, I'm actually not going I'll add a table surface here, what the heck. I'm not going to shade that in. In fact, I'm going to shade around it and kind of just leave that be for now. And I'll figure out what value I want to make that later. Remember, you can always go lighter, but once you put something down, it's kind of hard to go darker. It's not impossible. You can always come back in with a black colored pencil, but it's just really hard to go back over that pencil, so just be careful about that. And I'm being a little sloppy about how I do this, but I think you get the idea. There's my shadow that's hitting the table. I really need to pay attention to my edges here. I think I'm going to make this lighter than the table and come in. But of course, whatever I do, this is the lightest part. And there's my edge. Same thing over here. Little things like that. And I think you get the idea so far of how to make a styrofoam cup look like a styrofoam cup using the tools and techniques I just talked about. You know, obviously, just like I said, you can go back in and add things. Like I can come back in and add a little bit of black colored pencil here at the bottom and really make that darker. Maybe do the same thing, just a little bit, a little touch up right here. Little touch ups. But once I do this, it's kind of there for good. So just be careful about this. Don't overdo that. I think I'll add a little bit of light there. And of course, the idea behind this is you should be getting the same basic idea behind this as you would if this was a cylinder. So all these same elements are still in effect. Your reflected light, etc., etc.
I'm gonna go.